Hello. Hello! Welcome! My name is Bridie Rose Smith and we are live from the Forbidden Library. And it's nearly Christmas. This is my last Sunday reading stream before Christmas. Before the dreaded day where you have to hang out with family. But you get presents. That's always good. And food. Lots of food. Another one of the best bits. And hot chocolate. I've had 2 hot chocolates in the last couple of days and it's been great. Purple Door District really made me want hot chocolate. And there was a shop I went to that had they have tea baubles every year. So I get a bauble with loose leaf tea in it. But they also had baubles with like syrup in it. So I got some hazelnut syrup and put it in my hot chocolate. Hazelnut had chocolates and it was great. However, that is not why we're here today. Today we are here to read Perfect World by Shari Sakurai. It is a book, I read this quite a while ago now, probably a good I almost went 2 years ago then. Why did I need to swear then? Oh wait, I forgot to tweet, 1 second. I wrote up a tweet and then I forgot to send it. There we go. Now the world knows I'm streaming. The whole, like, 2 people who actually care about my Twitter. I have a fair amount of followers, but like, Twitter doesn't really work that well. Doesn't work like that. You can have many followers on Twitter and just like no one really cares. Anyway, so the book we're going to look into, I read it a few years ago. I believe Shari came to me asking for a review because at the time I did blog reviews and Perfect World was one of the first review requests I got actually. So originally I did get this book for free. I have gone and bought it now because I think I bought the others while they were on freebie anyway. So I have literally just gone and bought this so that I have a nice version to read on here because I couldn't find the copy I had. It is, in a nutshell, and in some very AO3-esque tags, a gay enemies to lovers post-apocalyptic sci-fi dystopia. That is what you're in for. And we get to follow my favourite boy. I love the protagonist on this one. And I don't know if we'll get far enough for you to love him too. As this is just a snacky preview. Let me just double check that I definitely put the link in the description for you to buy it. Yes, I did. So if you are interested after hearing me rant about it and hearing me read it, then the link is in the description. Go buy it yourself. Make Shari's Christmas and go buy her book. Anyway, let us begin this journey. I had to just quickly look up how to say Persis. Persis. I'm going to say it as Persis, and if it's wrong, I know, feel free to correct me, I guess. The Type 2 Persis 2115 broke through the cloud bank, its speed steadily climbing as it rose higher into the air. Its pilot smiled to himself as he took a moment to appreciate the clear air and the tranquility of his surroundings. The 2115 was the newest prototype of government-built stealth aircraft. Persis had built-in intelligence navigation, which enabled the computer to automatically take readings of the surrounding atmosphere and react accordingly. The autopilot could safely guide the craft through just about every kind of bad weather imaginable. It also had standard cloaking technology, Aura 1220 defense and shield system, and a decent array of weaponry. The 2115 was not designed for combat. However, it was not intended to be used for reconnaissance missions. What are you doing up there, Eric? The female voice sounding over the radio seemed slightly concerned. Eric Rawlins sighed and checked the navigation screen. He was about 3 minutes away and was 10 minutes ahead of the rest of the team. Nothing, Bex. Just giving the Perseus a bit of a workout, he answered calmly. Are you still on course? Matheson said having trouble... Start of stream struggles of getting into rhythm. But yeah, Eric is a good boy, and you should all love him. He is good. The goodest of goods. Matheson is having trouble tracking you due to the pollution levels today. Yeah, I'm on target, Eric assured her. I should be nearing the river any second now. You're not on radar. Can you please decrease? Can you decrease altitude, please? Yeah, in a bit. Just enjoying the clear sky. The silence that followed indicated that she was annoyed. Eric disregarded this and waited a further few seconds before taking Perseus back down beneath the smog cloud. Switching to autopilot, the computer confirmed as the first of the tall, dark buildings loomed to view. If you maintain your current course, you should be coming up on E2930 any minute. A male voice confirmed over the radio. Thanks, I. Any sign of trouble? Just the usual. Nothing you shouldn't be able to handle. The team is standing by. Good. I've got the visual. It looks in pretty good shape. The white and silver building appeared to be working as normal. Plumes of smoke rose up steadily from the two cooling towers. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. Are you being tracked? No, I doubt Larrymore's scanners are programmed to detect Perseus. It makes a nice change to be ahead of him. Doesn't it just? Contact me when you're inside. Will do, Sai. E2930 was a nuclear-powered electricity station situated on the northern bank of the River Thames just outside of London. Oh yeah, that's another thing about this book. Unlike Purple Door District, which is in Chicago, this one's actually in the UK. This is based in London. I am qualified to read this with my British accent. I'm not exactly a Londoner, but it's closer than Chicago at least. It was one of 3 that had fallen to enemy hands 6 months ago. There were only 4 working power stations for the city, and so the loss had put a great strain on the remaining one south of the river. E2930 was located just outside their shield boundaries, and had its own laser defense system, which luckily Perseus was designed to get past undetected. Eric's mission today was to retake E2930, and he had been instructed to do so by any means necessary. The enemy was 22-year-old genius Adam Larrymore, and the only son of business tycoon Victor Larrymore. He had been predicted to one day inherit his father's multi-billion-pound computer technology company. Victor Larrymore died of a heart attack when Adam Larrymore was 19. Much to everyone's surprise, it was announced that his stepson, Joseph Nichols, had been named as the sole heir. A few weeks later, Nichols and his mother were found dead. Adam Larrymore was the prime suspect, but he'd fled the city before an arrest could be made. He disappeared off the radar for some time before reappearing a year ago. He quickly made an enemy of the LSA, London Security Agency, although the skirmishes had been minor until 6 months ago. He was able to hack into Northern London security systems and reconfigure them to suit his own purposes. The defence shields that ran along the northern bank of the river and also encircled the entire northern side of the city. Designed originally to protect London from foreign missile strikes, they were turned against the city. He then reset the bridge defence systems. The loss of the North was a great blow for the country, which was still struggling to rebuild itself after the great tsunamis of 2049. I mean, let's hope this isn't a prediction, okay? No tsunamis in England, please. I like to live. The great tsunamis caused global devastation. They wiped out much of southern England and destroyed the majority of London's infrastructure. The dead count had been millions. The waters had taken years to recede, and things had never been the same. In 2052, the surviving countries went to war over the remaining resources. The United Kingdom broke apart, and armies from Europe attacked England. Ugh. Not very... The UK is dead. As we kind of deserve, not gonna lie. The country held on for nearly 2 years whilst the defence shields around the major cities were put into place. Rather than surrender, these impregnable shields meant that England could slip into isolationism, and remained so when the war ended a year later. It had been an uphill struggle since then, and things had been far from perfect before this had happened. In spite of Percy's advanced cloaking system, Eric retained some caution and circled the power station twice to ensure that he was undetected. He instructed the autopilot to hover over the roof of the building and locked the console to his thumbprint. Standard LSA procedure when in enemy territory. He removed the slimline silver portable control panel from the main computer and clipped it to his belt. The palm-sized computer enabled him to override controls set in the main console. This system proved useful if his retreat was cut off and he had to rethink his escape route. He had set Percy's to hover as low as he dared, but the jump was still a good 6 or 7 meters. The guards on the roof were going to get the surprise of their lives, Eric thought to himself, as the rear door of the craft opened. He could see 3 of the guards that protected Larrymore's interests. 3 was a surprisingly low number, but Larrymore's confidence had grown since taking control of the North. Without hesitation, he made the jump. He'd made bigger leaps than this one, and landed on the flat roof with ease. A yell went up from the nearest guard, and immediately they began shooting. Eric dodged the rain of bullets, imagining they only saw a black blur racing towards them. His fist slammed into the jaw of the first guard, and the man collapsed. His gun fell from his hand, and Eric kicked it harmlessly over the edge of the building. The second man raced forwards, with the intention of tackling him. Eric moved too quickly for the guard to process, and he soon joined his comrade. The third grabbed his radio and was shouting for backup when Eric reached him. He pulled the weapon from the man's hand and slammed it into his temple. The guard was unconscious, and he hit the ground. Dramatic voice. Did you make it? Bex's voice crackled over the radio. Eric covered his inner earpiece radio with a hand as he struggled to hear her over the static interference. I like that. That's a good reason to put your hand to your ear, because a lot of the time they kind of do that in movies, and it's as if they're going to press a button or something to talk, rather than, maybe just blocking out other sound. I can understand that. Yeah, no problem, he replied as he hurried over to the steel fire that led inside. The door was controlled electronically by thumbprint technology. Eric studied it for a few seconds before landing a hard kick to the metal. It buckled, and the second blow caused it to completely give way. Who needs technology when you have muscles? Immediately an alarm sounded. Eric winced at the shrieking sound. Any chance you can stop that racket? Not until you get to the control room, Eric. Sorry. the cheerful technician answered. Eric sighed and hastily made his way down the metal stairs. His dramatic entrance had been far from subtle, and 2 guards met him as he reached the bottom of the stairwell. Eric kept his fast pace and used the momentum to his advantage. He easily vaulted over both men, landing behind them and kicking the first in the back. He fell forward just as the other spun around. Eric raced forward, avoiding a round of bullets and grabbing hold of the man's wrist. He twisted it round and forced it behind the man's back. He cried out in pain and dropped the gun. Eric had been trained in martial arts since he was a boy, although he rarely needed to use them against Larry Moore's henchmen. The guards were only really posed a threat when they had guns in their hands. Eric threw the second guard into the recovering first guard, and they both fell to the floor. Without their weapons, they scrambled to get away. Eric hauled them both up by their jacket collars and slammed their heads together, instantly knocking them both out. Night-night! Eric didn't like killing anyone, even men who would not have hesitated to kill him because he's a good boy. And only did so in extreme circumstances. These guys had made bad choices, but they weren't beyond saving. They probably had families depending on them. Employment in the city was at its lowest point since before the Great Tsunamis, and they'd probably had little choice. The control room was on the ground floor, and as he suspected, Eric had to fight his way down there. He encountered 5 more guards on the way, and there were 2 further men standing watch over the control room. They were just as easily taken care of. The silver door was again opened by a thumbprint, and Eric doubted that he'd have access. It was made of a sturdier metal. It took him nearly a minute to force his way inside. A whole minute! Much to his surprise, the room was deserted. "I'm inside the control room," he said. The slim-line computer screens were displaying readings from each generator and the power output. Eric approached the console and pressed his thumb against the ID pad. As he suspected, a warning flashed up in front of his face. "Access denied," glared at him in bright red letters. "So, it looks like he's locked us out." Go figure. He heard the other man curse softly. It was a minute or so before he replied. "Are the readings normal?" "Yeah, working as it should." Eric studied the first set of screens, but it appears he's rerouted the power output to his headquarters in Sector 1. "We will need to shut it down." "Will we need to shut it down?" "Oh, hopefully not." "Can you attach Percy's portable computer to the mainframe? I should be able to gain access via that and override the current system settings. Once I'm in, I can guide you through rerouting the power manually." "As long as you talk in English this time," Eric reminded him teasingly as he located the access point for the portable devices on the left of the main console. Matheson had a bit of a habit of reverting to computer speak when they were carrying out missions. The portable computer slipped into place, and the console lit up as it connected. The silver and chrome surface was alight with colours, and the screen began displaying confirmation messages that the shields were down. "Are you in?" Eric asked when he heard nothing from the other man. "Yeah?" He didn't sound too sure. Just give me a second." Eric sighed and glanced back at the screens. Even though he'd been LSA trained since he was a boy, he never got a handle on the computer side of things. The only exception was an aircraft. Eric loved to fly. He'd love the freedom of being in the air and away from all the expectations and responsibilities of being LSA. He wished that he could get more clearance for leisure trips. The last time he'd been granted one was 2 months ago? He frowned at the small succession of letters and numbers that briefly flashed onto the screen before it went black. Sigh. The computer's just switched off. You do that? No. Matheson sounded worried. Hang on a moment. As he spoke, the screen flickered and then came to life. The series of letters and numbers reappeared. Eric was wondering if he ought to do something when the strange code disappeared and the screen was replaced with a video screen. Hi, Eric. It's good to see you again. Eric's heart sank as he immediately recognized the man addressing him. Adam Larry. I love this bit. I love this. Full villain mode. Full villain. Hey, hello, Luke Raptor Will. How you doing? Adam Larimore did not look like a villain in the conventional sense of the word. He wore a black tank top with an unbuttoned white dress shirt thrown over it, and a pair of loose-fitting jeans. A silver cross pendant hung on a chain around his neck, and he wore rings on most of his fingers. Good, glad to hear it. Jet black hair was a curtain, straight and fell down the small of his back. His features were delicate and his skin pale. He wore heavy black eyeliner and looked more like a 20th century rock star than a supervillain. However, his looks were deceiving. His stepfamily was the first of his many victims. I am good. I am sad that this is my last Sunday stream before Christmas. But I'm excited to be reading this book because I love the main character Eric in it. He's a good boy. I wish I could say the same, Eric answered him. He'd only ever come up against Larimore directly on 2 occasions. Neither party could claim to have come out on top on either encounter. It is a dystopia. The name really gives that one away, doesn't it? What Larimore lacked in physical strength, he made up for with intellect. He had an amazing ability to read people. He could predict how Eric was going to react before even Eric knew himself. This made him all the more dangerous. When Eric thought he was ahead, Larimore proved him wrong, and he had a horrible feeling that it would be the case today too. What do you want? Eric demanded of the video screen. Larimore smirked obnoxiously. To thank you, of course. Thank me, Eric repeated doubtfully, for ruining your plans for E2930. Which... No. For the gift you've brought me. Eric. As if on cue, Bex's voice sounded over the radio. Did you instruct Perseus to take off? No. Eric frowned and consulted the portable computer. The funny combination of letters and numbers were back and scrolling rapidly on the screen. What have you done? He demanded, glaring furiously at Larimore. The villain's grin widened. Eric! Matheson said urgently. He's hacking Percy's main computer. Disconnect the portable immediately. That won't do any good, Larimore cut in smugly. In fact, I'd strongly advise against it. Ignore him, Bex snapped. Pull the plug, Eric. Why? Eric asked, paying no attention to his partner. He glared angrily into the blue eye. What have you done? My program is destabilizing the nuclear reactors powering the station. Any further interruptions would cause them to blow. Wouldn't that be tragic? He's bluffing, Bex insisted. An explosion would be powerful enough to wipe out the city. He wouldn't risk it. Wouldn't I? Larimore locked gazes with Eric, as though daring the hero to test his word. Eric, I'm getting unstable readings from the reactors. Matheson cut in urgently. Stop this immediately! Eric demanded. He knew his command would fall on deaf ears, but he hated feeling so helpless. He had no choice. He had no choice other than to let Percy's go, and they both... Larrymore was consulting the console in front of him, and several agonizing minutes passed before he addressed Eric again. Thank you for your cooperation. See you again soon, Eric. Then the screen went black. Damn it! Eric cursed softly. Sigh. What are the reactors doing now? They've stabilized. The relief in his voice was obvious. What about Percy's? Can you track it? I'm afraid not. He's disabled our monitoring software. Should have known this was too easy, Eric murmured softly. He didn't care about E2930. He was after Percy's. Looks like it, Bex answered coldly. The team has just arrived. I've ordered them to do a sweep of the building and arrest Larrymore's henchmen. Williams wants you back at HQ immediately. Her voice was icy, and she clearly blamed him for the loss of the aircraft. Eric, Matheson's voice was far more sympathetic. Wasn't your fault. We couldn't have called his bluff. Williams will understand this. I know, Hero sighed as he ran a hand through his brown hair. I should have guessed that something was wrong. His mission was going too well. At least we've retaken E230, the technician reminded him kindly. That was our main objective, remember? Without the power station, the south of London was going to start experiencing blackout. Already electricity was being carefully conserved in some of the poorer areas. The shields along the south bank alone required a great deal of power to function. Without them, they would be sitting ducks. The loss of Percy's blow, but Matheson was right. At least they'd regained control of E293. Even so, Eric had a feeling that not all the LSA would be happy with this partial victory. Da-da-da! Oh, just a second. Take some drink. Totally didn't go down the wrong way a little bit there. But we're fine. Yeah, chapter 2 already. We just had what was basically a wonderful futuristic super sci-fi infiltration with a wonderful villain intro. I love it. I love Adams just straight up, wahahaha, I am the villain through the screen and I will taunt you into doing what I want. It's great. I love it. I love how classic it feels at the start. But they lost the very high-tech ship, which is Yabai. However, we can continue with chapter 2. The LSA headquarters was situated in Sector 4, Ward 1, Old Southwark, on the former hospital site. The mood there was far from jubilant when Eric returned. The LSA was formed a year after the Great Tsunamis, and the government was tasked with defending the capital against both national and international threats. Although suspicions had never been confirmed, Eric suspected that the government allowed the LSA to have free rein and do whatever was necessary to protect London's interests. Simon Matheson, Si, greeted him as he stepped into the central control room. The 51-year-old man was somewhat of a father figure to Eric. Matheson often gave him words of advice and comfort when missions didn't go their way. There seemed to be more of the latter these days, Eric thought uncomfortably. Williams was not going to be happy. Any luck finding Percy's? He asked, Matheson hopefully. The technician shook his head. I doubt we'll be seeing that aircraft again. Don't apologize. You did good today, Eric. He smiled and gently squeezed the younger man. I don't think everyone will feel the same way, he murmured, as his gaze fell on Bex, who was frowning down at her computer console. Matheson's smile faded, and he took off his glasses, rubbing at a non-existent smear on the lens. She's under as much pressure as you. Try not to take anything to heart, the older man advised him. Eric frowned. It wasn't the way he saw things at all. All this was on him, and had been since he turned 16 and was allowed to go out into the field. After that day, the spotlight had become firmly fixed on him, and would remain so until the day he died. Rebecca, Bex, Vixen, was an LSA special agent. She had been trained from 10 years old and, like Eric, the LSA was the only life that she had ever known. But, not unlike Larrymore, her looks were deceiving. Honey blonde hair was layered in waves, whilst on duty, was tied back into a ponytail. Her ivory skin was flawless. She had large sapphire blue eyes and full lips. She was petite, extremely agile, and as well trained in martial arts as Eric was. Eric surveyed the rest of the control room. The junior technicians are working hard at their stations, and only gave a few quick glances. The hero made his way over to his station and slumped down on the chrome and white leather chair. It was kind of Matheson to reassure him, but he couldn't help feeling that the loss of Percy's was his fault. Larrymore was fond of LSA technology. He should have guessed that the new aircraft would have been on his wish list. An envelope symbol appeared on the touchscreen computer console, indicating that Eric had a new message. Then maybe you should take one? There's no law saying you cannot sleep at whatever time it is for you. Sleep is for the people who like sleep. He sighed and pressed the read button, already knowing what it would contain. He acknowledged it and took a few seconds to check his diary for the rest of the day. Eric's heart sank at the highlighted text indicating a publicity event later on. In all honesty, he just wanted to go home. Instead, he did the next best thing. Eric, Bex called as he passed her. Where are you going? We've got a meeting in. I won't be long. He cut in before she could finish her sentence. I just need a couple of minutes. He didn't wait to hear her reply. The headquarters were made up of different levels. The main control room was on level 1. Level 0 was a basement, which Eric assumed was storage, but he'd never been down there himself. The second level was home to the laboratory, infirmary, and offices. The third housed the LSA's archives. This was where Eric was heading now. He passed several staff members on his way. They greeted him politely enough, but did not stop to talk. They were too busy dealing with the Percy's crisis, Eric thought uncomfortably. The third floor was deserted. He came up there a lot. Like with flying, viewing the archives helped him relax, especially if a mission didn't go as well as he'd hoped. The central archives had their own room and computer system. The console was powered constantly, and Eric only needed to input a security password in order to gain access. The rest of the large room was sparse and, like the majority of the rooms in the headquarters, was painted white and furnished in silver. This decor scheme was common throughout the city. With power cuts and darker days, it felt like the lighter buildings were the better for those who dwelled within. Eric only needed to study the choice of archive footage for a few seconds, as he already chosen subject as he already had his chosen subject in mind. He pressed the display text and then set the crowd count to 5%. He put on the headset and sat down in the white leather chair. Eric closed his eyes as the footage began to run. When he opened them again, he was no longer in the archive room. Virtual reality holiday packages had been in the development stage before the Great Tsunamis, and had been predicted to take over 20% of the holiday market in their first year of operations. After the devastation, the government had changed the project's direction, and it was developed into preserving places that had been destroyed. This allowed generations who otherwise wouldn't have been able to visit these places a chance to glimpse back at another time, at another life. The particular footage that Eric had selected was of the Natural History Museum that had once been located on Cromwell Road. The building and the majority of the artifacts had been destroyed. However, enough archive footage remained to recreate much of the museum's attraction. Technology had come a long way since 2014, when the footage was recorded. To Eric, he was no longer at the LSA headquarters, but had been transported to the museum in another time. As he walked through the central hall, he could actually hear the excited cries of children as they stared up at the wonder at the large skeleton of the Diplodocus, which dominated the hall center. It is a very cool place, and I highly suggest a visit. Natural History Museum. I've been a couple times now. Good. The computer program did not generate these children. They had been visiting the museum the day of the footage was recording. Of course, they were long gone now, but their images were forever preserved for countless generations to witness. A part of Eric felt saddened knowing that their lives had ended so long ago, and so he never set the crowd count higher than 10%. He knew where he wanted to go, and took the opening on his right. This led him through the green zone's bird exhibits, and the red zone. The red zone was all about the earth and the forces of nature. As Eric walked through, he wondered if anyone visiting had ever truly thought about tomorrow, and the world and what would come. Even before the Great Tsunamis, the Earth was on a path to disaster. Technology had advanced greatly and the world's population exploded. By 2049, the world's population had almost doubled. The resources and power supplies were stretched to their limits. Climate change had become a main concern and threat. But as some scientists have predicted, there was no way to stop it. The increasing temperatures triggered a series of natural disasters. Firstly, the effects were felt in poorer countries, and many were laid to ruin. Then in 2049 came a deadly chain of undersea earthquakes. These caused huge tsunamis to form. There had been nothing that anyone could have done. I believe it did state what year this actually takes place. Let me just put a little bookmark here and see if I can go find it, because I can't remember specifically. Right near the start, it told me. It's we're probably talking like 2050 something. And then country was held for nearly 2 years. So we're talking 2050, 55, I reckon. That's where we are. How do I get back to I know we were in chapter 2, so let's skip over the chapter 2 and then find my bookmark. What did it? 24 to 8. Yeah, we go. Was no way of stopping it. That's my book. The increasing temperatures triggered a series of natural disasters. Firstly, the effects for temporal nothing could have done. Yes. Overnight, many countries were leveled. Those that remained fell into chaos. After the great tsunamis came the war. Nations began attacking each other and fighting for the resources that remained. After the war ended in 2055, America followed England into isolation, whilst much of Europe and Asia became unrecognizable as the Neo-Third World. Some alliances were made in the years that followed, but these were fragile and filled with mistrust. Over 60 years had passed since the tsunami, and still England was not fully recovered. The population was estimated to be just over 3 million. Most people resided in the cities as they felt safer living within shields protection. Climate change was still a serious problem. Power supply was severely limited in some areas. Personal transport had been made illegal, and now ordinary civilians were forced to either use the public rail system or eco-friendly methods of transport. The surviving road system of the past was barely used. It was too late to truly reverse the damage that had been done. They could only survive best they could, and hope that with time, the Earth would heal naturally. Eric sighed as he came to a pause in front of an exhibit detailing scientists' plans for eco-friendly generated power. The past had been ruled by money and greed, and so many of these ideas were blocked or permitted only limited use. Despite the sadness at these archives held, Eric liked to come here and view the past. Regardless of the technological advances, there was something special about that time, something worth holding on to. As he studied the text accompanying the exhibit, Eric became aware of someone standing behind him. 2090s sounds about right. If it was like 60 years after the tsunamis, and the tsunamis were in the 2040 something. 40, 50, 60. Yeah, that would make it 2100s. Maths. Got some brain maths going on. This is strange, as the footage of people never interacted with him directly, or even gave him a second glance. Why would they? He had not existed when it had been taken. To them, he was a ghost wandering the halls, nothing more. Yes, it's a very, very long time in the future. And hopefully if it doesn't come to pass, we do not want the 2040 great tsunamis, thank you. Especially if pretty much only London's gonna survive in England. I don't want that. I will not survive. He focused on the reflection of the man, and cold shock washed over him as he realized that he knew him. Eric whirled around, but Larimore was too quick even for his usually superior speed. This indicated the villain wasn't actually in the LSA building, but interfering with the footage. It would appear that he'd hacked and inserted his image into the program. What he had to gain from this, Eric didn't know, and he was debating giving chase when abruptly the museum scene disappeared before his eyes. Eric glared up at Bex in irritation as she terminated the program. Her lips were pursed together in annoyance as she worked. Slowly, Eric removed the headset. Williams is getting impatient, she said in explanation. The hero sighed and logged out of the system. He followed Bex from the room in silence. This quiet remained as they went back down to level 2. Eric could tell that his delay had infuriated her, but part of him didn't care. They both paused at the silver door at the end of the long white corridor. Bex pressed the intercom button and spoke into the microphone. "Agents Vixen and Roland to see you, sir." "Come in," was the curt response. Seconds later, the door slid back to reveal the office within. As with the rest of the LSA building, the office was decorated in white. The walls were tiled. The tiled floor, and even the desk were the same colour. The office was always cold and a dismal place to visit. See, the thing with everything being in white is I got an image in my head there. You know, like those places you go to where they paint everything in white and then they give everything a big black border so it looks like everything's a cartoon drawn in 2D. That's kind of what I imagined for a second. I don't think that's right, but... There were 2 pictures on the walls and no houseplants. The only colour came from the computer console built into the desk. The flat screen currently showed the security system's views of the control room and front reception. Eric sat down on one of the chairs in front of the desk. Bex took the other one. Neither of them. Ivan Williams was the head of the LSA. He was 6 foot tall and was of an ex-military background. He was 54 years old and had been the youngest ever head of the LSA when he was appointed 3 years ago. He was often aloof and seemed to care very little for his agent. He had a face like chiseled stone and black hair that was streaked with silver. His hard brown gaze made Eric uncomfortable. He had already known that Williams would not be with him. "Today, we need a serious face for this serious man. Today has been nothing short of failure, and not to mention an embarrassment for everyone at the LSA. The Percy's 2115 has been in commission for 3 weeks. Would one of you kindly explain how it is that Larrymore even knows about it, let alone was able to steal it right from under our noses?" "Agent Drake is looking into it," Bex replied. Her cool demeanour was shaken at the anger in Williams's voice. Agent Carl Drake was head of the intelligence within the LSA. He believes there to be a virus in one of our mainframe computers. Larrymore most likely planted this a while ago, and unfortunately went undetected. William's expression darkened. He was not satisfied with her response at all. "And how is it he's almost continuously hacking our system? We are equipped with supposedly the most advanced computer systems in the world, and he makes a mockery of this." Bex held his stare. "You'd have to ask Drake and Matheson that. I'm not a computer expert." "I am well aware of that, Agent Vixen. They will be held accountable for any failings on their behalf. But Operation Lex was your responsibility, and therefore mistakes are down to you." "I apologise. You can rest assured that we are doing everything we can to recover Percy's. You'd better. And find out what that maniac plans to do with it. Preferably, he's calling us to gloat about it this time." Fully chastened, all Bex could do was nod and further reassure him that she would do everything possible to recover the stolen aircraft. "You're being very quiet." His hawk-like gaze now firmly upon Eric. The hero flinched despite himself. He was already feeling bad enough, and Williams appeared determined to make him feel worse. Perhaps you can enlighten me as to why you did nothing whilst the craft was being stolen. Quite literally, above your head. With respect, sir, he had threatened to destroy the city. I did not think it wise to call his bluff. And you believed him? Adam Larrymore is completely vain and self-obsessed individual. He will send his henchmen to fight us rather than risk his pretty face. Do you really think he's going to cause a nuclear meltdown in a city where he happens to be residing? I was created to protect and defend the city, Eric countered quietly. He wasn't going to sit there and take that. His life was dedicated to London. He'd have rather lost 100 Percys than risk the city and its population. I did what was best for the city, and unfortunately that was letting Percy go. If given the chance to do things again, I wouldn't change that. And that is why he's such a good boy! Such a good boy! Ah! The goldenest of good boys. William scowled. Perhaps I should remind you who created you. You belong to the LSA. You only exist because we made you. I understand that Agent Vixen wished to call his bluff. Next time, you will follow her orders as though they are coming from me. Do I make myself clear? Crystal, Eric murmured unhappily. Good. You may leave. May I also advise that you never keep me waiting again. If I request a meeting, I mean that you attend immediately, not at your leisure. Sorry, sir. Eric apologized softly. It won't happen again. Make sure it doesn't. You have not missed anything on the side of what he is yet. I do not believe that has been revealed yet. Did you have to piss him off even more? Bex demanded once they were safely down the corridor and out of earshot. That wasn't my intention. I was just telling him the truth. No, Ivan's right. Larrymore wouldn't have destroyed the city. He screwed up today and had probably endangered a lot more people by losing that aircraft. Eric silently shook his head. He wasn't so sure. Who really knew what that villain was thinking? We've got to go and see Drake about the We've got to go and see Drake about the security breach in our computer systems. I've got to go see Drake about the security system. You've got an appointment with Dr. Beasley in 5 minutes. I'll meet you back home. Don't forget the publicity event at 3. Ivan emailed me the briefing paper first thing. Please at least give it a read this time. We don't want to mess up that as well. I will, Eric half-heartedly assured her. I mean it, Eric. No more screw-ups. Today, please. I'll read it, he answered, trying his best not to snap at her. He didn't want them to be at each other's throats by 3 p.m. Eric was a bad enough liar as it was, and awkwardness was always picked up on. When you see Drake, tell him to run a scan of the archive footage. I think Larrymore's messing with that too. Delicate eyebrow arched in surprise. Really? What makes you think that? I saw him in the Natural History Museum footage. I was going to follow him, but he pulled the plug before I could. Bex ignored the dig. Perhaps you are mistaken. He doesn't exactly blend in with the crowd, the hero pointed out. Just ask Drake to check it. I'll ask him, though probably won't do it this month. Got bigger problems here than the archive footage. I know, just don't overlook it. Could be important. Bex didn't respond to this. It was clear that she was dismissive of the matter, and didn't really believe that Eric had seen Larrymore in there anyway. Ah, that's fair. I hope you're going to go have a nap if you're very tired. Oh, but also wanted to say, good luck with your Twitch. I will follow, but I do have a different name on Twitch. I don't have an actual account properly on Twitch, but I will make sure to give you a follow on it. And have a nice Christmas break. Make sure you get lots of rest. Perhaps he should speak to Drake himself tomorrow instead. Bye! I'll see you back home, the blonde called over her shoulder as she stepped away from him and hurried down the corridor. Eric didn't reply. He didn't think it was wise to dismiss anything where Larrymore was concerned. The villain was always ahead of them, and Eric dreaded to think just what he had planned for the stolen Percy's 2115. Chapter 3. Ah, 1 second. I really love this book. Jerry, if you're watching, or if you come back to watch later, hurry up with the next one, okay? Personal request from me who loves this series. Ride faster, especially after the bloody ending you left us to last time. Like, meh. As you can see, I love my golden good boy, so you know what that ending did to me. You do. I need to know what happened. But for now, let's revisit some of the past. Some chapter 3 of the first book. It is quite fun to go back to and be like, ah yes, I understand these characters already now. I felt like I didn't know who most of these people were to begin with. Now I'm like, I understand. Quite fun going back. I wouldn't normally go back to read books, so I'm really glad that these Sunday story times have given me a reason to do that a little bit. It's very good. Anyway, off my rants now and back to the plot. Hello, Eric. How are you today? Dr. Sally Beasley, the head of the LSA's genetic research, and their on-site doctor greeted him as Eric stepped into the infirmary. Dr. Beasley was... Beasley? Is it Beasley or Beasley? There's no, like, R for a bear. Beasley. Beasley. That's how I was saying it. Was a sturdily built woman in her late 40s. She had never married and dedicated her life to research. Good, thanks, Doctor, he answered politely. Dr. Beasley was not afraid of, and no stranger to, confrontation. Eric had even heard her stand up to Williams on occasion. He did not doubt that she heard what happened with Percy's, but Dr. Beasley rarely commented on the mission or their outcomes. She was only interested in the LSA's scientific work. Take off your shirt and sit up on the table, she instructed him as she studied her computer screen. Eric did as asked. He had these medical examinations every month and knew the routine by heart. The table was a bed-length steel surface covered with a thin white paper. It was cold, and Eric shivered slightly. Dr. Beasley continued her work at her computer console, inputting several figures before turning round to face him. Eric knew that, to her, he was a scientific project more than a human. He had been genetically engineered in the LSA labs 25 years ago. In a bid to control the population, families were only permitted to have one child. Mandatory genetic selection had been introduced in 2063 to ensure the best possible gene pool. Unauthorized conceptions were automatically terminated with no chance of appeal. To appease the fury that met with these new laws, the government offered prospective parents the opportunity to select their baby's eye colour and hair colour, as well as gender. The super rich, however, could afford to pay for extras, such as detailed appearance and intellect. Victor Larrimore had specified every single detail of Adam's appearance and personality. He had also gifted his son with genius level in IQ. It was ironic how the government's own greed and technology had severely backfired on them when Adam Larrimore turned to crime. Eric, however, was very different. He had been created with one purpose in mind. He was, by definition, a genetically engineered superhero. The super good boy, that's who he is! He could break through reinforced doors as though they were made of paper, could move faster than any human on record, and his body was not susceptible to any known disease. He could be injured, but his body healed minor injuries within minutes, and major wounds within hours. I've been watching a Gundam. I can't remember. Gundam. Is it Seed? The HD remake of the one with Strike, that one. And they started with something like this with the coordinators when they started having genetically engineered people. And then they started a war with natural people. But luckily there's only one of Eric as far as we know. So there's not going to be a war. For now. No one knew just how slowly, but he could be in his 20s for possibly more than 50 years. The LSA created him to defend London's interests against threats from rogue states and those within their own country who would wish the capital harm. He occasionally assisted with projects in the north of England. Hey, the north's okay, that's where I live. But was mainly concentrating his efforts in London, especially since Adam Larrimore became the #1 threat to the city. Over the years, Eric had achieved celebrity status, and the LSA used this to gain and keep public support. For the most part, Eric felt honoured to be able to protect the city. England had been through so much hardship, and it made him happy knowing that he was contributing towards a better future for the capital and the country. However, Eric sometimes contemplated what it would feel like to experience real freedom. His life had been scripted and laid out before him since birth. When he flew an aircraft for leisure, he occasionally had the urge to just fly away and never return. Then he would feel terribly guilty for even considering it. London needed him. A lot more of Larrimore's evil schemes would have succeeded without him being there. Eric? He blushed when he realised that Dr. Beasley was now standing in front of him. Where's did? That. Words. He had a habit of zoning out, and he knew it frustrated a lot of people at the LSA. Sorry, Doctor, he apologised quickly. I need to take the monitor reading before we begin. It may hurt a little. Despite her warning, Eric hardly noticed when she pressed the flat surface of the circular scanner against his chest. Whilst out on missions, the chip inside him recorded his heart rate, pulse and other organ functions automatically. The monitor was no bigger than a pea and lasted for 10 years before it would need replacing. Dr. Beasley took the device over to the computer console. It read directly from the scanner wirelessly and took a matter of seconds. All your vital signs are reading normal. You experienced some stress during the mission, which is to be expected considering what happened. How do you feel in yourself? A little tired, Eric admitted. How are you sleeping? She didn't look up from the readings. Not well. He couldn't as of late. Eric was only able to get a couple of hours a night if he was lucky. I can give you something to help you with that. I'll also advise a few days leave. Of course, it may not be possible considering the current crisis. Yeah, Eric sighed. It would seem the loss of Percy's was going to be haunting him for a while longer yet. Right, he approached him again. I need to take some blood. Eric nodded and held out his arm. He barely felt the scratch of the needle and watched in silence as the doctor drew enough blood to fill the syringe. She handed him a cotton pad to press over the area as she withdrew the needle. It wasn't really necessary as the small scratch healed in seconds. The doctor then sent him through to the adjoining bathroom to collect a urine sample. Upon his return, she took the jar and told him to get on the scales. Eric was aware that he'd lost a bit of weight, as he had been skipping a few meals. Dr. Beasley frowned disapprovingly and lectured him on the importance of eating 3 good meals a day. Eric agreed with her and promised that he'd do so in the future. Eric's responsibilities required him to be physically fit. He worked out every day and had a perfectly toned body. There wasn't an ounce of fat on him, but he didn't appear undernourished either. Eric was just under 6 foot tall. He was aware that he was clean-cut. His clean-cut good looks had been selected in order that he appealed to the public eye. His light brown hair was short, with the longest strands at the back just brushing at the nape of his neck. His eyes were mocha brown, and Eric had been told they were very reflective of his emotion. He supposed that this was true. He never could hide what he was thinking and feeling very well. Eric sat back down on the table, and Dr. Beasley completed her examination. I've sent a report to Williams recommending that you have a few days off to rest up properly. I've also prescribed you something to help you sleep better. Ensure that you eat 3 meals a day and that they are from the diet plan that we drew up last time. Eric didn't want to point out that the diet plan was probably a contributing factor. Everything else in his life was regimented to some degree, and they had always restricted his diet to some extent. Last time, however, the plan had been significantly changed. The new health pack supplements and pre-prepared meals didn't taste very nice, and Eric had begun to dread eating them. It was futile saying anything. Dr. Beasley considered him a project and cared more about her work than she did Eric. Thank you, Doctor, he said as he pulled his shirt back on. If you have any other health worries, do come back to me. Otherwise, I'll see you next month. Eric paused at the dispensary to collect the bottle of blue-coloured pills that Dr. Beasley had prescribed. He wasn't a fan of medication and would have preferred to address the reason why he couldn't sleep. His home was only 2 streets from headquarters, and Eric almost always walked. He was occasionally stopped by a couple of fans and was happy to sign an autograph or have his picture taken with them. Today he was glad that he was able to reach the apartment without seeing anybody. The sky above was dark and thunder rumbled in the distance. It was a bad day for a publicity event, Eric thought to himself as he stepped inside. 1 second, I need a drink. Hydrated. His home was a tower block of apartments that had been built 10 years ago, especially for LSA agents. Eric and Bex's apartment was on the top floor and had been built to the highest specification. In addition to the basics, it had its own gymnasium and swimming pool. The apartment was modern, although Bex had requested it to be furnished in wood rather than standard metal. And honestly, good taste on her. The living room and kitchen were open plan and separate doors led off to the bedrooms, bathroom and gym. Eric pressed the tile on the side of the door leading to his bedroom. The double bed was immaculate, as always, although there was a small silver chip sitting on the pillow. Recalling Beck's mentioning the briefing, Eric took the data chip and slotted it into his EOS-V computer. The EOS-V portable computers were standard issue to LSA agents. Larrymore Systems had developed the original EOS model, but after Joseph Nichols died, the company had been sold to a rival firm and renamed Neo Technical Systems. They had continued the successful EOS line, although the later models had never been as popular as the originals. A wall of text immediately flashed up on the screen as his computer read the data chip. Eric sighed as he sat down on the edge of the bed. He set the bottle of pills down on the bedside cabinet before starting to read. The briefing was pretty standard. Williams would address the public to inform that the Operation Lex had been successful and that the LSA had now retaken E2930. He would take a few questions before handing the stage over to Eric and Bex. Eric just had to make a quick speech, answer a few questions, and then sign autographs right at the end. Bex had the easiest. She just had to hold his hand and pretend that they were the perfectly happy couple. This was the part of the job Eric hated the most. As he was being styled as a hero, the LSA had deemed it necessary that he had a pretty girl on his arm. Bex played the part of his loving girlfriend very well in the public eye, but behind the scenes it was a different story. Eric suspected that her true role was to keep an eye on him and assure that he didn't step out of line. Eric knew that they wouldn't ever trust someone with his abilities and would want to keep as close an eye on. Bex had been assigned to him the day of his first mission. The LSA hadn't even asked her to pretend to care about it. They just told them both that they were to play along. Eric didn't know why he didn't, and often wondered what would happen if he ever met someone whom he really cared about. Bex already had. She had been seeing him for 2 years now. The relationship was allowed as long as she kept it discreet. Eric didn't know if he could ask a partner to settle for that. It didn't seem fair on any of them. It was half an hour before Bex returned. When she entered his bedroom, she immediately spotted the bottle of pills. What are they for? Dr. Beasley said they would help me sleep. That's good. Did you read the briefing? He questioned. Yeah, I've got a few days off after today. Dr. Beasley's orders. Oh, Williams will love that. Bex commented as she went through her bedroom. She returned a few minutes later wearing a sky blue sundress and a white cardigan. She rarely dressed this way, but the pretense of the doting and gentle girlfriend wouldn't allow for any other image. She pulled her blonde hair free from its usual ponytail and started to brush out some tangles. Did Drake find the computer virus? Eric asked her. Yeah, but it's proving difficult to remove. We may have to wipe the system. Oof. Great. Eric sighed. That would cost the LSA thousands of pounds, and funding was already lower than it ought to be. There is one other option. What's that? Larrymore. If we can get him, then we can make him. If we can get him, then we can make him delete it. Eric doubted this. He'd led several missions trying to capture Larrymore previously, and all had failed. Eric hated to admit it, but the villain was too smart to be caught. He said as much to Bex. Don't be so sure. He's bound to make a mistake sooner or later. He's not superhuman like you. Eric didn't think he would, although he chose not to voice his opinion. He checked his watch and saw that they had plenty of time before they had to leave. He picked up his computer and decided to go out onto the roof for a while. Eric tended to go out there when he wanted some time alone, and he knew that Bex wouldn't want his company. In fact, she didn't even comment as he left the room. It was raining by the time the publicity event came to an end. Whilst the overhead stage canopy covered the members of the LSA, the public was soaked through. Eric felt bad for them and stayed for longer than was required of him. He never really got used to the cheering, the calling of his name, and the endless marriage proposals. It all seemed very strange to him, and more awkward. Eric could be shy at times, and Bex said that the public found this even more endearing. He was probably right, Eric thought, but as he put his arm around another young woman requesting a photo, Bex usually was right about this kind of thing. "Marry me," the redhead whispered into his ear as she all but draped herself over him. Eric smiled uncomfortably as Bex took the photo. She handed the computer back to the young woman, who reluctantly let go of Eric. In an act of feigned tenderness, Bex wiped some wet strands of brown hair from Eric's face. "You'll catch your death out here," she said. "We should call it a day for now." There was still a line of fans, and Eric didn't want to disappoint them. However, the rain was falling heavier now, and Williams was glaring at them whilst gesturing to his watch. "Okay," Eric began. Eric?" Matheson's voice suddenly sounded urgently over the radio. "Eric, can you hear me?" Eric placed a hand over his hair so that he could hear the technician better. "Yes, what is it?" "What does he want?" Bex mouthed as Eric moved away from the line of fans. "I've located Percy's." "That's great! Williams is still here. I'll let him know." "No!" Matheson's voice was anxious. "It's not." "It isn't?" "Tracking Percy's location. It's 5 streets away from where you are. From where you are now. And moving quickly towards your location." Eric glanced up and scanned the dark. "Can't see it." "The cloaking system is on, but he's enabled the tracking system. This isn't going to be pretty. Get as many people out of there as you can." "Bex." Eric turned to the blonde. "Matheson says Percy's is 5 streets from here. We need to clear the whole area immediately." Percy's wasn't a combat aircraft. However, it was more than capable of killing everyone here. "Shit," she breathed softly. Help get people to safety. I'll tell Williams and the other." The meek and mild girlfriend mask slipped instantly as she vaulted back up onto the metal stage. A cheer went up from the crowd. They clearly thought it was part of the event. Eric thought quickly. The old disused London Bridge tube station was a street away from here. The tunnels themselves had been stabilised after the Great Tsunamis, but the transportation system had never been put back into operation. Everyone would be safe there. Oh god. Get into the tube like sardines! Not that they aren't horrible, hot and sweaty in the best of times. "Okay everyone, we've got an unfriendly aircraft closing in on our position," he shouted as loudly and calmly as possible. "We have some time, but we have to move quickly. We're evacuating to the old London Bridge tube station. Move as fast as you can, but don't panic." "Eric!" Bex called as she returned to his side. Eric hadn't moved from his position and was directing people down the street towards the tube station. "Williams is calling for air backup, but they won't be here for a few minutes. He's ordered us to get out of here." It didn't surprise Eric to see that Williams and his security were already leaving the scene in one of the LSA's private cars. "We can't leave the people out on the streets," Eric protested incredulously, "because he's a good boy!" "The goodest golden good boy." "Williams is sending agents to London Bridge Station to protect the civilians, but he wants us out of here." "I can't do that, Bex." "Eric, this isn't up for discussion. Williams has orders." "Eric!" Matheson suddenly cut into their conversation. Perseus is almost on top of you. Clear the area, now! Where? Eric glanced up, and his heart almost stopped. The overcast sky began to shimmer before darkening and forming a black metal winged structure above their heads. Oh my god, Bex whispered in fear as she took a step back. Thankfully, most of the crowd were further down the street, but a small number remained. Go with them! Eric shoved the blonde in the direction of the now fleeing group. Eric, just go! Bex didn't hesitate again. Run! Eric shouted at the remaining civilians. A blast from the single gun at the front of the aircraft tore through the panicked screams. The far end of the stage exploded in flames. The force of the blast knocked Eric off his feet. He gasped as he slammed against the concrete, the painful landing forcing the breath from his body. He watched in horror as the weapon turned on the retreating civilians. Glass, steel, and other debris showered around the ones still running. Many of them fell to the blast alone. The continual gunfire ensured that they didn't get up. Matheson! Eric called desperately. Is there anything you can do? No. My scanner says it's set to autopilot defense mode. The only thing we can do now is blow it out of the sky when backup arrives. So there's no human pilot? Eric confirmed, struggling to hear the older man over the gunfire. No, the scanner indicates that there is no human life on board. Looks like he's programmed it to cause hell on its own. Does the autopilot defense still run on heat signals and movement? Yeah, Eric. Please tell me you're not about to do what I think you are. I am afraid so, Sai. Don't. Even you're not fast enough. Just tell Williams back up to hurry. Eric! He ignored any further protests. Perseus wasn't pursuing the group. It didn't need to. The gun was long range, up to half a mile. Eric couldn't outrun it, but that wasn't the plan. He just had to distract it. Now that the sensors had locked onto the civilians, Eric would have to get right in front of them in order to distract the craft. The temporary stage had been set up in front of an old block of flats. Each individual flat had a balcony. There was another similar block on the opposite side of the streets. Oh, this is insane, Eric murmured to himself as he climbed back onto the stage. He sprinted along its width, using his speed to gain momentum as he jumped. He used the steel skeleton roof as a springboard, landing on it only for a few seconds as his hands closed over the balcony rail. He climbed up onto the metal edge and jumped again, easily catching hold of the one above. Eric repeated this action until he was about level with the hovering craft. He balanced carefully on the balcony railing. Then he jumped. His precision had to be absolute, or the gun would blow him apart midair. As it was, Eric felt the wind from the gunfire as he dived right across the front of the blinking red sensor. He slammed into the metal railings of the balcony opposite. Somehow, Eric managed to hang on and haul himself over the rail. He turned as he heard the gunfire cease and the hum of the engines. Perseus rotated so that it was facing him. A white beam of energy shot out, slamming into the floor directly in front of him. Eric was thrown back into the apartment itself and was immediately surrounded by gunfire. He got to his feet, scrambling over the piled up furniture and stored boxes that lay within. Eric, Perseus is tracking your movement. Get to the lowest levels of the building, Matheson warned. I know, I'm trying, Eric shouted as a sofa in front of him exploded in a shower of metal and white fabric. He raced back further into the living room, and the gunfire followed him. Eric could move almost impossibly fast by human standards, but Perseus, he might as well have been moving in slow motion. He saw a grey door and tore towards it. His palm slammed against the tile on the wall. Eric desperately hoped the electronics in the buildings hadn't been cut off yet. Much to his relief, the door groaned and began to slide back. However, his relief was short-lived. He raced into the corridor as Perseus fired again. The blast smashed through the closing door and the wall beyond. The force of the impact knocked him to the floor. Eric coughed as clouds of dust and debris filled the air. He was struggling to get to his feet when he felt a sharp blow at the back of his head. Everything went black. Da-da-da. Oh, okay. I need a drink after that. It's exciting stuff. Wah! Well then. The ship's back, and we wish it wasn't. I'm almost tempted to say that I'm actually going to end it there, because I think that's a good place to stop. This is the action-packedness you can expect from this series. It's got some really good moments like this, and it spirals out so good. We do get more of like the rest, a little bit more of the UK and things happening outside of London. It's mostly London-centric, as you can tell by the book, but it's very exciting. I really love this book. Eric is such a good boy. He gets tested through it, as most golden good boys do. This is really good, okay? This is really good. So if you're wanting some enemies to lovers, dystopia, sci-fi, post-apocalypticness with high action and super genetically enhanced people who are kind of superheroes and kind of not, then this is a great series. And it has been so far. Like I said, I'm 3 books deep. I am more than looking forward to the next book. There's also a side book that admittedly I haven't read, but is probably still good because Shari's writing is good, as you have experienced in this small taster session we have had. And you can grab the whole book on Amazon. I think it's other places. I don't know if she went wide or not. But anyway, there's a link in the description to Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. That's what I'm reading it on. And it's good stuff. But that will be, I think. That was a lot. My throat hurts. Thank you very much for coming. This has been Brownie Rose Smith, live from the Forbidden Library. I hope you enjoyed. Next week, I will be streaming some Sonic tomorrow. And then after that, you can consider me on Christmas break. And I will be back at some point. I will have a schedule ready for you for tomorrow. And then I will be able to tell you exactly. But for today, you know I'm going to be back tomorrow, 8 p.m. GMT. And whenever that is for the rest of the world. It'll be on my goodbye screen. So I hope you had fun. I had fun reading this. Perfect World is a fun book. I highly recommend it. But for now, goodbye.